I'm just going to ask you to cut me some slack. It's the first time I open for Omid Jalili. So, normally it's the other way around. But if you notice some similarities, it's truly accidental. I mean, my friends call me the Lebanese Omid Jalili. With hair. That was all improvised. Right. What I'm going to talk about today is a very literal interpretation of society beyond borders. I'm going to be talking about mass immigration. I'm going to be addressing the biggest obstacle that I see towards us embracing the notion of mass immigration and universal freedom of movement, which is a culture of pessimism and an attitude that sees humanity as essentially problematic. But before I do that, let me do the standard thing and tell you a little bit about my background through these TEDtalks. 3 generations ago, my entire family on both sides lived in one small village in Turkey. Following the upheaval of World War I, and for a variety of security and economic reasons, they spread around the Levant, Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. And this pattern accelerated until in recent years, I have now family spread all over the world. And every dot is either a family or a cousin or an uncle or an aunt. And I'm sure I'm not unique in that, but what this has given me is this kind of ability to appreciate the freedom of movement and to start again afresh in life and to work to promote this idea and to ask people to join me up in working for this idea. But other than the personal interest, what I'm going to be bringing to this is my professional and intellectual interest in the subject. I really like the title a lot. It's very aspirational, it's visionary, it's utopian in the best sense of the word. And I think it's a truly noble purpose that we need to work for, but we need to stand for it on principle. Let's look, for example, at the largest experiment in open borders that we've seen in recent years, which is the European Union, and specifically the Schengen Agreement that allows freedom of movement within Europe. While that has had a measure of success, it has come at the expense, if you like, or it has come by creating borders that keep out, sadly, the all too familiar sight of African immigrants trying to arrive these shores and them being turned into a problem primarily, into a a problem for European policy and an attitude of how can we keep them out. And this is precisely what I want to tackle. I want to prove if we actually let them in, it's a good thing. And for that, we need to champion the universal freedom of movement, no ifs and buts. Let me just examine a changing ideal of immigration over the duration of the 20th century. I promised myself to do all of this PowerPoint without using one picture of the Statue of Liberty, but I couldn't help quoting the inscription on it by Emma Lazarus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, to breathe free. Let's jump to this year in David Cameron. Britain will always be open to the best and the brightest from around the world. Now that's a bit of a changing ethos. It's not necessarily that the United States in the late 19th century fulfilled that ideal completely, but at least it assumed that it pronounced to the world that it has that ideal. We no longer even try to live up to that ideal, and we prefer to look at immigration in very pragmatic and practical terms. There are a lot of people out there who do great work in support, for example, of refugees. That's a very good people to allow people to move to the West or to Britain specifically. There's also a lot of people, I don't know if you're familiar with this, this is the Polish plumber, which was very controversial subject in the no vote for in France on the EU referendum, and very cleverly the Polish Tourist Board took that idea and turned it around to say, come and visit Poland. He's my less handsome brother, by the way. That kind of economic argument that says good immigrants are the ones that come here and are skilled and all that kind of thing is also good. But together, these arguments are very defensive, I see them, and I see them as limited. Why can't we just say, open the borders, let them all in? Please stop me if I break into a spontaneous rendition of John Lennon's Imagine. but I'm going to try to keep my feet on the ground. Now, counter to that, we hear these objections that sort of say, but immigrants come here and take our jobs. Immigrants come here and undermine our culture. They're not good for social cohesion. That's very narrow-minded and misanthropic and doesn't understand how culture developed historically. The myth of a pure culture is a myth. That's what it is. There is no culture in the world, apart from isolated indigenous cultures in very outlying areas, that haven't benefited historically from this universal movement and intermingling of people. And in fact, if you examine the official UK book, the Life in the UK book, which immigrants have to take in order to take a study to take the citizenship test, you find something very interesting. The immigrants, there were the Vikings that came here and kind of looted and raped and pillaged and settled, are treated with more respect than the people we actually went out and recruited to come to Britain after World War II in terms of writing history. So what I'm saying, let's look more precisely at that history and appreciate what the value that immigration brings in. But those arguments are not the biggest obstacle towards opening borders that we have today. Those are kind of, in a sense, populist, extremist, right-wing, whatever you want to call them, and they kind of invalidate themselves. We have a different, more insidious argument now, and it's, I'm going to put my best British accent on for this. Sorry, mate, we're full. And it's basically, we would like to help you, but what can we do? Britain is full. About a year ago, Panorama, the BBC program, did a program precisely about that, and it was phrased as a question, is Britain full? But pretty much if you watched it, the implication was, Britain is full. But that's an interesting thing. I'll go on in a bit and talk about what the problem with that assumption is, with that conclusion. But think about it for a little bit. The BBC is not some sort of shrill, marginal voice. It's a mainstream media organization, and it does reflect now a very mainstream opinion that Britain is indeed full. Now, I'm going to counter that by saying Britain isn't actually full, and there's a lot of opportunity. But what we have here is a failure of the social imagination. It's not that we ran out of resources and land and space, because we stopped thinking ambitiously about how we kind of energize the process of creating more resources out of that. We don't have enough hospital beds, build more hospitals. We don't have enough schools, build more schools. Now, obviously, that's good for me as an architect, but we all benefit from that. Now, central to the Panorama program was this prediction by the Office of National Statistics that by 2030, the population of the UK will increase to 70 million from roughly around 60 million today, and that a third of that growth will come from immigration. Many kind of pre-immigration voices said, that's actually not true, you've kind of extrapolated exponentially, the figures are not right, you're scaremongering. But my attitude is different. My attitude is, so be it, the more the merrier. How can we actually deal with that? But that's not the culture that we operate in today. The culture we operate in today is, for example, Forum for the Future, the NGO, put a completely negative spin on, and it's called growing pains. That's how we manage population growth in the UK. But furthermore, let's look at the imagery. It's very suggestive. This is not an innocent image. It's an image that suggests we've kind of literally running out of space, we're overstepping our limitations, and that's suggestive of humanity in general. And that's what I would like to term this kind of cultural pessimism, this lack of ambition and the ability to trust ourselves and our ability and kind of resourcefulness to deal with, I don't want to say influx of people because it sounds a bit negative, but let's go with influx. Let's look closely a little bit at the UK. At the moment, and compare it with one of its neighbors, which is the Netherlands. Admittedly, it's the most densely populated country in Europe. The population density in the UK is 255 people per kilometer square. That of the Netherlands is 402. If we increase the population of UK to a similar density to that of the Netherlands, we can go up to 98 million. Remember, the problematic figure is 70 million by 2030. And is it really that horrible to live in a place like that? So what I'm seeing is an opportunity. It's a sort of glass half full, glass half empty situation, except in this case, we need a bigger glass. And I'll tell you how we get a bigger glass. Despite all the myths that you hear about Britain being concreted over and full, the blue zone down there is the 6% of built-up areas in the UK. And we pretty much got a lot of space to play with. The rest is about half dedicated to agriculture and 44% woodlands, grasslands, and semi-natural and natural habitats. Now, to put this a bit in context, according to the government's projections, and in order to build 3 million new homes at the guidelines now, we will only need to use an extra 0.3% area of Britain's area. Considering how much agricultural land is being taken out of production every year in Britain, we have plenty of an opportunity. What we're lacking is the aspiration and the desire to seize on that opportunity and make something out of it. And let's bear in mind, we're not doing that just for the immigrants. We're not sort of saying, let's open the doors, let's be kind of completely charitable. I don't want to start to sound like a contestant in Miss Universe over here. But there's quite an opportunity. We have an aging population, and we're going to need loads and loads more people in order to kind of support this aging population. But also, it's a question of mindset. There's natural population growth within Britain, and it's also related to economy. Instead of thinking about and thinking, shall we cancel or not cancel the 50p tax, a big program of building that includes transportation and hospitals and school can actually give that injection to the economy. But what's the obstacle? That cultural attitude that sees humanity as negative is a big barrier. And we've trained ourselves to accept that in kind of the past few decades. A few years back, some of my colleagues and I wrote an architectural manifesto in which we wanted to challenge that cultural moment. It was called Towards a New Humanism in Architecture. I'm just going to quote from it. We said, with half the world's population living in cities, and that was a milestone we reached about 3 years ago, where is the sense of exhilaration in the creative urbanization of a planet for 7, 8, or 9+ billion? Such a dynamic moment in history demands maximum engagement. What we're asking is, let's not look at population growth as a problem. Let's look at it as a challenge, but also as an opportunity. How can we use that to kind of do what every generation before did? They stamped their own image on their cities and on their civilization. How can we use that opportunity and not keep promoting fear and pessimism about population growth, and by consequence, the levels of immigration? But we've popularized notions like the human footprint that have become, in a way, subversive, and what started as legitimate concern for the environment has been taken to the extreme where everything that humanity does, and by implication the kind of population growth, is necessarily negative. And you see that in the imagery. I advise you to I recommend that you actually go and check out this. The American economist Thomas Sowell did a calculation in which he proved that we can fit the entire population of the Earth today in single-story houses. We can fit them all in Texas. Now, I understand we don't all want to live in Texas. And we're going to need a bit more space to grow some food and for the rest of the stuff, but that kind of is radically different from images such as these, which promote the idea that humanity has completely broken all the limits and we're sort of staring annihilation in the face. So what I'm saying, let's not ignore that there are real challenges out there and environmental problems, but let's not internalize that and turn it into a moment of cultural paralysis. Let's seize the opportunity. I had to stick in something about the Middle East because I thought the revolutions that we saw earlier this year, and some of them are continuing in the Arab world, were kind of a spark of inspiration. They're a moment in which we kind of saw, after like a long hiatus of
nothing really happening, people attempting to seize their own destiny with their own hands. And probably for the first time in a long time, we saw the sight of millions of people coming together. We don't watch it and think the mob. We watch it and think there's a possibility in there. And what I want to say kind of subversively is let's link up to that sense of optimism and see how we can use it to improve our own situation. But let's close on a fun note. And for the non-architects over here, I recommend that you look up the work of an architectural group from Britain from the 60s called Archigram. And they used to do all these visionary, crazy schemes about how we could expand our cities. So the one on the top is called Walking Cities, and all sorts of kind of crazy ideas. But what was significant, what those kind of experiments signified, is a moment of optimism. The 60s were about the sense of possibility. I'm not talking from a sense of nostalgia. I'm talking about a rediscovery of that sense of the possibility, but also of having fun while we do it. If you talk to anyone who's concerned with urban planning or architecture in this country, anything to do with expanding a city or adding a few houses is treated primarily as a hassle. It's a problem. We treat everything as if it's going to be a really draining experience rather than a fun experience. So what I'm asking is, let's rediscover that joy of re-envisioning and reimagining the cities that we live in so we can accommodate way many more people and have fun while we do it. And maybe that would be a step towards a society beyond borders. Thank you.